Hey guys, we're here with director Jake West, who's directed many films, including Evil Aliens, Doghouse, and many documentaries. Welcome to Beyond the Veil Horror Podcast, Jake.
It's great to be here on Beyond the Veil Horror Podcast and all the way from London.
Thank you so much for coming on. So I guess what I wanted to ask you, I mean, you are originally from London?
That's right, yeah. I was born in a place called Lambeth, which is by the River Thames, and my parents are both Londoners, and yeah, I live in London still now. But for a bit of my life, I moved away. When I was between 5 and 16, I lived in a place called Kent, and then I came back to London after I'd been to film school.
So it's pretty safe to say you love it there.
Oh yeah, I mean London's it's a great city, but at the moment it's kind of cold and wet, so it's probably nice and warm where you are.
Yes, it's actually pretty nice out right now. I've actually been out to Sheffield,
Right.
Out that way. Well, I've been to London, but then Heathrow, and then we flew over to Sheffield, and then took a train. I guess.
Well, Sheffield's a bit further north than where we are.
Right.
But I don't know Sheffield that well, but I know a few people who have been there, and it's supposedly a nice place.
Yeah, it was interesting to be out there, but I know that I've watched a few interviews about you, and you had mentioned that you were a big fan of a lot of movies and such, and that you felt like you kind of got a little bit of a late start in the game for some of your favorite directors. When would you say you first started like getting the inkling that you wanted to do film or little stories for yourself as a kid even?
Yeah, well, I was a kid I was a teenager in the 1980s. So growing up at that time, it was a great time to be a film fan because obviously we had the whole explosion of VHS, and there was a real chance to sort of catch all of those great horror movies from all around the world that you couldn't see before that because they just weren't shown. But VHS opened the doorway to exploring and discovering a lot of filmmakers. And when I was when I was about 14, 15 years old, I was discovering stuff like Phantasm and The Evil Dead.
Excellent.
And I was being a little bit critical of myself when I had a late start because I made my first feature film when I was 26.
Right.
That doesn't seem that old, but the thing is, back in those days, it was a lot more difficult to get films made because you have to make stuff on film. There wasn't like cheap cameras, and everything was a lot more analog. It was an analog world,
right.
And because I was fans of people like Raimi and Coscarelli. When I was reading about them in stuff like Fangoria and fanzines, and they were saying that they made their first films when they were like kind of 18, 19 years old. Yeah. So to me, it was kind of like I was actually like blown away by the fact that it was like an 18 or 19-year-old that made The Evil Dead or Phantasm, because those films have just got so much energy and they're so great. And previously to that, all the films that were being made always seemed to be made by sort of older filmmakers, or more respectable kind of filmmakers, not teenagers.
Sure.
So for me, that was just my inspiration. But living out in Kent at that age, when I was like 15, 16 years old, I didn't really know how to get into filmmaking. And it was actually video that kind of saved me because it was the birth of video and home video cameras started becoming available. So I saved up for a couple of years and I bought my first video camera, which was a JVC SVHS GR707 camera.
Nice.
And I used to shoot movies with my mates, and we just did all sorts of silly stuff. But the problem is that there was no access to any editing equipment at that point because home computers hadn't happened. It was stuff like ZX Spectrums and Commodore 64s. You couldn't edit anything back in those days. So it took a while, but I was lucky enough that the sixth form college I was going to, they started a module called Media Art Studies, and they got some video editing gear in, which was all, I don't know if you know the format U-matic, which is an old editing format, but they had some U-matic editing suites. So I got a chance to start editing my footage rather than trying to crash record it from a camera onto a video recorder. So that was the kind of birth of me becoming a filmmaker, and that was about 1987.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I was a little bit fortunate as a kid with using film myself. Not to bring up me, but it just reminds me because my father is a video editor, videographer.
Oh, awesome!
And so I had access to those things, but yeah, it wasn't until college.
But what year was that, Alex? Though, when you said you had access?
Yeah. Let me think. I have to think about this now. I remember my father was probably the first person to have a video camera.
Oh, cool. Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. So there was a lot of fun little things that we did, but I would love to see what you actually did. Do you still have some of those tapes laying around?
Yeah, I've got some of my. I've got a lot of my really early short films on VHS. I mean, they're kind of pretty funny. A lot of them have gunfights and murders.
Right.
there's one called Who Done It, which was a story about who farted in a room.
And it's a gun movie. Like they shoot each other over it.
Didn't have guns. The weapon that was more of a kind of Agatha Christie kind of murder mystery. You know?
That's great.
Yeah, but I was very influenced by Sergio Leone. Actually, one of my favorite films of all time is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And when I was a kid, I used to love that film so much. And you know, the big gunfight at the end, because I was fascinated. Because I couldn't edit, I used to watch sequences which had a lot of editing and edits in them. So when I started shooting stuff, in a load of films, I kind of tried to recreate that Sergio Leone gunfight from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So that was a kind of way of teaching myself editing.
No, that's so. But I mean, so you had to do a streaming, like a full shot, without any cuts at first, and then you.
Well, no, but when we had access to, like I say, edit facilities, I just kind of reshot that gunfight in quite a few different films because I was always fascinated about how you create tension and build up just without dialogue. Because you know, when you're first starting out and you're working with your friends, on the whole they're pretty lousy actors. So it's kind of like if you do stuff with visuals, you can generally build more stuff which isn't so laughable, rather than having kind of teenage gunfighters in London isn't really that scary.
From all the stuff that you've done, I know that you're a huge horror fan. And I mean, what would you say? I mean, just as a general question here, I mean, what do you say the reason that you're drawn to horror, like for you personally?
For me personally, what I love about the horror genre is that it's actually a very broad genre. There's a lot with it. You know, there's a lot of different subgenres within horror. You know, whether it's supernatural or spatter or kind of like suspense or monsters. There's so much stuff that you can do within horror. But what I love about it is it inspires you to use your imagination, and kind of like what's great about a filmmaker is creating visuals, creating a world which doesn't necessarily exist in the real world. Because let's face it, in the real world, we're not really worried about vampires or ghosts, or do you know what I mean? But
sure.
In film. But so that's what when you're making a film which uses those ideas, it's like you're recreating reality, which I find more interesting than just filming reality. You know, kitchen sink dramas aren't that interesting to me because they're a bit too much like real life. I like stuff which is different to real life. You know, like when I remember seeing, say, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, it must have been about 1984 or 1985 when I saw that. And I was just blown away by how imaginative it was. You know, if you died in your dreams, then you die for real. And that was such a strong idea, for instance. And I love that. And it's just, and the surrealism of the dream sequences, but scary and with a great idea. And it's those kind of concepts which make you think, wow, there's a lot you can do in horror. And then, for instance, say if you look at another film like by Wes Craven, Last House on the Left, for instance, how different is that from Freddy Krueger? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like one's a rape prevention, and that's a horror film, and the tone of those films are so different. So within the horror genre, you can achieve like a very different result. But if it lends itself to imagination, it lends itself to creating something more than just reality, and I love that aspect.
It's well put. I really feel like horror and the community I've noticed is just so creative. Like just the watchers, they're just so creative.
Oh yeah, the horror fan community are the best. And when you go, I don't know if you go to the many like horror festivals. I've been lucky. I've been lucky enough to be invited with my films to many of them around the world, and just the fans are so warm and they're so supportive, and they really love, they really love the genre in a way that I don't think you see that with other. I don't know whether there are kind of romantic comedy festivals, or if there's kind of
action film.
And maybe there are, but I haven't been to them. But I've never. The audiences at horror festivals are just so great, and every time you do stuff, they're so supportive, and they're really knowledgeable, and they push the filmmakers to become more and more original all the time as well, because the audiences are smart in horror. They know what they know their stuff. So when you're making a horror film, you've got to know where where the state of the art is at. So you've got to keep on trying to do something different and trying to push that audience if you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there's just such a connection. It's almost like birthing a child when you get scared as a kid. It's some sort of weird, twisted nostalgia that you hang on to. And my father told me, you'll get over that when you get older. I have not gotten over it, and I don't think there's going to be any slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah. But I think that's one of those things. I think culturally there's been a big shift as well, though, because I think that people of a certain age, of a certain generation, they found this kind of material quite offensive. Right. Because people who were in their sort of 50s in the 1980s, because we had this big problem, the video nasty scare in the UK.
Correct.
Which I made a couple of documentaries about that. And if you've seen them and you look at the news reporting and the way that a certain generation reacted to this stuff, they were genuinely sickened by this sort of stuff, and they just couldn't understand it. They were, and I don't think that they were being complete dicks all the time. Some of them were, but a lot of them just couldn't get their head around why people would enjoy stuff like that, because they came from a different time where they just weren't used to seeing anything like that kind of material.
Right.
For them, seeing the cover of Driller Killer was a bit too much for them.
Right. They thought it was the Fall Society.
Yeah, exactly. And but I think that things have changed a lot. And, I'm a generation, I think you are, where we actually grew up with horror films and we're really comfortable with them. And if you look at the younger kids now who are into horror, I don't think that their parents are saying to them, you shouldn't watch them. Whereas when I was growing up, some people's parents were saying, you shouldn't watch them. And I think that we just accept movies in a bigger way now than we did back in those days.
I agree. Yeah.
Or a different way,
I think, some parents were a little weird around my age that wouldn't let their kids watch it. My parents would always say, if it scares you, just turn away.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's a healthy attitude, though. It's the parents that aren't worried about it. The kids aren't so fucked up. It's the ones that are repressed normally have problems later on.
Right. You don't have to worry about the ones out in the open.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But normally people who are interested in this, I find that most horror fans are reasonably well adjusted. Not all of them, but most.
Right. No, I really think you did an amazing job on the 2 Video Nasty movies that you did. They're very comprehensive. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm not from the UK, but it can, like, comparing it to the MPAA out here and what you guys went through out there, it's very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure. I mean, censorship and, in all of its forms generally tends to be very restrictive. And, in the UK, it was particularly bad. But in a sense, the irony is that because we were all part of that and we all railed against that censorship, we all became. I may not have been a filmmaker if that hadn't have happened. And so many people owe their careers to this stuff kicking off. And so actually, maybe it was a good thing because it gave us something to react to. So in a sense, that kind of increased our intensity towards it in some ways, but by being told we weren't allowed to watch that stuff. So, when you spent 3 or 4 years trying to find a video nasty that you're trying to, trying to find Cannibal Apocalypse for like 3 years and then you finally see it and it blows your mind. That is an amazing feeling. Whereas these days you would just go on the internet and you'd have it like 5 seconds later. So it wouldn't mean as much. Yeah. So in some ways we were lucky because we had to become connoisseurs, we had to become detectives, and maybe that was a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember there was a lot of mail order VHS tape places that you could get some of these like really hard to find movies with later on, and that was just, it was like you were one of the only people in your area that had that movie.
Yeah, exactly. And then your friends would come over and watch it. It would give you social currency in a way that the internet didn't. Doesn't.
Right. That was the internet for us.
Yeah, exactly. The internet was a very different sort of network, wasn't it? And but obviously things moved a lot slower. And I guess I don't know. Have you done many podcasts with the next generation of kids who are kind of like teenagers now making films? So what's their experience of all of this? I wonder, what their views of films. The movies that influence them. It'd be interesting to know that because, I think that's the next generation of people that will have a very different experience of growing up in terms of what we had.
Well, I'm surprised a lot of kids still enjoy some of the older classics, and I've heard both sides of it. They like some of the 80s stuff or older, but a lot of them are a little bored by it because they don't understand it. But at that time, it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of decades that a lot of people hold dear to their heart. Do you have a particular decade, by the way, that you love?
Well, I mean, I love the 80s because I was a teenager in
Right.
it, and because obviously, I got to see like films like Evil Dead 2 at the cinema and the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and just stuff like that was so amazing. And I don't know if you know about Don Coscarelli's just done a 4K remaster of Phantasm.
Yes. Yeah, we've talked about that. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you know that I did the Phantasm documentary.
One of my questions was actually about that.
Well, we'll get to that. When I was a teenager, I only saw Phantasm on video. I got it from my local video shop, and I've still got the copy that I hired when I was a 14-year-old. I've got it up on my shelf behind me. But I love that film so much, and that I never had a chance to see that in the cinema. But with the 4K remaster, Don came over just a month ago, and we saw it as part of the London Film Festival. So I got to see Phantasm finally in the cinema with a big audience, and it's such a great experience. And that's I think that's why I love the 80s so much for me, because I got to see those films like Society with an audience in a cinema.
Right.
And that was really special because those kind of horror films work brilliantly when you've got a big audience. Hellraiser, amazing with a big audience, stuff like
absolutely. I feel like they just don't make movies like that anymore. And what an honor to be able to be a part of the actual documentary of, I believe it was called Phantasmagoria.
Phantasmagoria, that's correct. Yeah.
Which was an amazing documentary. And I actually, one of my buddies who, through one of the horror websites, it's called Horror Amino, if you're not familiar, but he actually, I told him I was going to be talking to you, and he was super excited. He wanted to ask you about what the inspiration was for that. But it seems like, that's the inspiration. Don Coscarelli was one of your first movies that you just fell in love with.
Oh man, yeah, because what happened with Phantasmagoria, the documentary, and it's unbelievable, because I was speaking to Don about this. I mean, we did that 11 years ago now, and it's just ridiculous how that seems to have passed in no time.
Right.
And we were very lucky to do that documentary because I was such a big Phantasm fan. The guy I work with, my partner in Nucleus Films, is a guy called Mark Morris. And we had started doing like DVD extras work for a company called Anchor Bay, which I think you probably know in the States.
Of course, yeah.
They had a UK like version of it, and that was run by a guy called Mo Claridge, who was a really big innovator in the UK VHS video scene originally, and then he went into DVD. And we were lucky enough to do work for him. And because I love Phantasm so much, when we found out he was licensing the films for a box set 1 to 4, we said to him, "Look, we love this so much. Would you allow us to do a documentary about it?" And in the past, he'd been doing a lot of work with like Blue Underground and David Gregory and Carl Daft and those guys, because David's based in the States, but they were doing something for Phantasm. But we begged him and said that we could do something really special, and we kind of talked him into it. So we were lucky, and we flew out to LA. We hooked up with Don, and Don introduced us to everybody. He drove us around. For me, it was a dream come true, man. I was walking on air. I got to meet the tall man, Angus Scrim.
Wow.
Just like we were hanging around with Reggie Bannister, hanging around with Cat Lester. It was a dream come true, man.
It's like a kid in a candy store. I wouldn't even be able to how to contain myself. I'm like, am I dreaming right now? Is this really happening?
Yeah, and Don said, because I'm such a big fan of the films, Don said to me, even I was asking questions that even he had never thought about. So he was really pleased with what we did. So that was just one of those dream jobs. And, and that's one of the films that influenced me. And he was one of the filmmakers that influenced me. And now I'm lucky enough to call him a friend. Do you know what I mean? And that's
amazing.
Wonderful thing. Yeah.
So you are going to be doing the documentary? Or is that okay to share on there?
The documentary on what? Sorry.
The new one on the box set that they're putting out.
Oh, well, no, I don't know about the new one because we haven't covered the Ravager, because that hasn't been released in the UK yet. And,
right.
Yeah, so I think that they may have that covered, actually. But we would love to bring Phantasmagoria up to date if we could.
Right.
But I can't confirm anything on that because that's, like I say, Ravager hasn't been announced here yet, and Don thinks it's not going to be till 2017 for us in the UK.
Gotcha.
And we're not sure who's going to release it. I mean, I think Arrow are interested, but I don't know who's done. We're not sure who's done a deal, but we're going to chase it to see if we can. But unfortunately, I can't say that we'll do the new. Have you seen the new one yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I went to the theater to go see it.
Yeah. Oh, cool! Because I'm looking forward to seeing it in a theater here. But like I say, I know it's been released on like a VOD in the States, but we haven't got it yet. So
man, how frustrating.
Yeah, well, I'm holding off, but we got to see the Phantasm 4K restoration, but unfortunately they didn't show Ravager, which was a real shame. So they should have done it as double bill, I reckon.
Yeah, that's. I guess it's just the region rights and everything like that that they have to work out.
I mean, Don's a very smart. He's a very smart producer, and he makes sure he does good deals, and he owns most of the rights to the Phantasm films. So he's very clever when it comes to that. But like I say, that's what I'm looking forward to. But if we could get involved in doing something for that and topping up the Phantasmagoria documentary, I'd love to do a segment on it. And
that would be amazing.
But I can't confirm that will happen. So
they did announce that they were going to be doing a box set that it will be released out. I thought it was in both UK and here, but
no, the UK one hasn't been announced yet because there's no distributor. I mean, but we know that, like I say, we know some companies that are looking. They would like to do it, but they haven't signed off on it as far as I know yet. But I'll check on Amazon while we're chatting. Actually, just see.
Might as well. Yeah, I don't mind.
Cool. So yeah, that's that. I mean, Phantasm. Yeah, one of the great movies for me. So.
Yeah, I really love the idea. It was so fresh and original. I don't know. It has, like, the first one in particular for me. I do like the second one. Yeah. But the first one just, I don't know, there's something about it that just had so much mystery to it.
Yeah, the first one, I think it's because it's so unself-conscious as well. It's just like the performances are really great. The relationship between, the brothers, Jodie and Mike, is just really heartwarming, and there's some really lovely performances in there, and you get the feeling that they really were friends. And I think that comes over on screen. And Don was doing a lot of stuff which then got copied in later films. I mean, like A Nightmare on Elm Street borrowed heavily on some of those dream sequence ideas.
Right.
Like hands coming out of the grave and walking through the mud and not getting anywhere. All of that stuff Don did quite a few years before anyone else. So he was ahead of the curve, and it's a great movie. If anyone out there on Beyond the Veil hasn't watched it yet, go and watch Phantasm.
Yeah, really. Shame on you if you haven't. Cool. Well, I did want to ask you one thing. I mean, I know you've done quite a few feature films. One of the first ones, I believe, was in 1998, the Razor Blade Smile.
That's correct. That was my first feature. Yeah, my debut.
Well, I want to ask you about that. I mean, have you ever considered revisiting some of those characters and at any point whatsoever?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I did actually write a sequel to it, but because when we made that film, it was made on a really low budget. It was a £20,000 movie, which was shot on 16mm with a crew of 8 people. So it was, at best I thought we would get a VHS video release, because this predates DVD, like the sort of birth of DVD, which is starting to release that film. And we were amazed at the response we got to it when we took it to the Cannes film market and festival. And, people went nuts for it. And we all started getting offers from people saying they would give us a theatrical release. And, we had a couple of companies fighting over it. But because it had been shot on 16mm, and I had only mastered it up on Beta SP tape, because I just transferred the rushes as cheaply as possible onto video and cut it on video. So we had no film print of it. So we had to go back, and they gave us money to basically go back, and I had to match it all and then get the neg cut and then get it blown up to 35mm, then do a proper cinema sound mix. So most of the money was spent on bumping it up for a 35mm release, because that was the only way to release films back then. It had to have a 35mm print, and that was a laborious and expensive process when you'd shot on 16mm on short ends. Sure.
I believe the Peter Jackson had to do the same thing with Bad Taste.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, when we shot Razor Blade Smile, I didn't have enough money to process the film, so we had a 3-week shoot, which started in November in 1997, and we finished just before Christmas. And then basically, I'd run out of money, so I had to wait 3 months before I could get the film processed. And I kept on thinking of those terrible stories that David Lynch had when he'd done I think it was his first film, Eraserhead, and he started shooting it, and then a lot of the film hadn't come out. So I had nightmares that I was just going to end up with nothing.
Oh man. Yeah, just the waiting is horrible enough,
So sorry, to go back to your original question. Because of that, we did a deal with a company. You probably know, Island Records. Island Ireland had a film company at that point, and they were called Palm Pictures, which Chris Blackwell owned. Palm Pictures, they had a sub-label in the UK which was called Manga. I don't know if you have the Manga label out in the States. I think you might have done.
Maybe.
Yeah, but anyway, Manga, they're the guys that picked up the movie. But because they picked up the movie, I was kind of first timer. I didn't necessarily do the best deal on it. So they picked up the rights for 25 years. So they still own the rights for another, I don't know, it's another sort of 12 years or something.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. Jeez.
Yeah, before it returns to me. And the thing is that they own all of the rights to all of the characters and everything in the deal that we did. But I did get a bit of money out of them to write a sequel to it, which I wrote. This is in like about 2000, and I really liked it. It was called the working title was actually Razor Wired Snarl.
Oh, nice. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and then I retitled it because a lot of people couldn't quite get their head around that, so it was retitled Razor Blade Smile 2: The Devil's Vendetta. And it was basically Lilith Silver versus the devil.
Wow. That's crazy. So did they like it, or is it just?
Well, they liked it, but the problem is because the first film was made on such a low budget. This second film would have needed quite a lot bigger budget, and I don't think they wanted to spend the money that it was going to take to do it. So I kind of misjudged that. So I should have really written a film that could have been achieved on a lower budget.
Right.
So it's kind of like, because of the fact that they own the characters and they own that script, I can't really do anything with it. Though.
Right.
So that's kind of the reason that I haven't gone back to it, because I would do. So if there's anyone out there at Manga or Palm Pictures, let's see, if Marvin Gleicher's out there or Patty Fister or any of you guys who I worked with back in the day, and you think you might want to resurrect that script, give me a shout.
Hey, someone asked about it, so there's obviously other people out there.
Yeah, no, people, like I say, a lot of people like that film, and for me, it's just that it was my first movie, and obviously I can see all the problems with it. It was such a low budget film, but a lot of people really like those characters, and I did want to do more with those characters. I did want to do something bigger with it, and we did do something. So it's just one of those things. It's one of those things where I did the work, but then it never got made. So there you go. Like, welcome to the film industry.
Wow, that'd be great to see. I mean, there was a little bit of a gap in between that movie and then your next feature.
Yeah, well, partly that was because I had written this Razor Blade Smile sequel,
right,
which in the end didn't get made, and
which you were trying to get off the ground.
Yeah, and I was a pretty slow writer in those days, and even though after I'd done Razor Blade Smile, because all of the money on that film was spent on getting it released in cinemas, and it's not like I made a bunch of money. It wasn't like an international massive hit. It sold around the world and it made money for people, but because they had paid us a kind of lump sum to get the thing actually bumped up to 35 mil, I wasn't kind of in that position where I was being thrown loads of other things to do. So it took me a while, and then I was writing some others, because after the vampire, the sequel didn't happen, the Razor Blade Smile one. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, hey, what I'd really like to do is and this is like must be like 99 or 2000 at this point. I was thinking, what I'd like to do is I'll do a zombie film, because nobody's done one of those for fucking like 10-15 years.
Right, at that time especially.
Even though this sounds ludicrous to say this now, because every fucking other film is a zombie film now, back in those days nobody was making zombie films.
Right.
There was no zombie films, and because producers, for whatever reason, they did not want to make zombie films back at that point. And I pitched this zombie film, and I wrote a zombie film as well.
That's crazy.
Which was called The Dead and the Damned, which is this crazy zombie film, which I loved. But once again, producers thought it was going to cost too much money because of the amount of makeup effects we would need and blah, blah, blah. And because I'd only done one very low budget film, they didn't trust me with that kind of budget. So a lot of the set pieces from The Dead and the Damned I retooled for Evil Aliens.
Wow. So you kind of, oh wow. So was the story very similar to that?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't very similar. It's just there was a couple of characters in it, like the guy with the. I always had a fascination with fighting zombies with a bow and arrow, which is fun. And that's why you've got the farmer character with the bow and arrow in Evil Aliens, because I always thought it's a great weapon. And it's funny because The Walking Dead has completely used that character with the, in a sense, not saying they saw.
He's kind of like the Daryl.
Yeah, the Daryl guy, and he's
Yeah.
he's a great character, but it's a great weapon. Like, do you know what I mean? And I always just really like the idea of that as a weapon.
Well, it makes more sense because you can always reload it.
Because also it doesn't make a load of noise. It doesn't attract them. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
it's a smart weapon to use as long as you've got enough arrows.
And you're a good shot.
Yeah. So there was a number of characters that I really liked in this thing, The Dead and the Damned. So I kind of assimilated those ideas and I put them into Evil Aliens. And basically, if you look at Evil Aliens, in many ways, Evil Aliens is a zombie film where they're not zombies. The zombies are aliens instead.
Right.
because they're just fucking evil, you know. And zombies are kind of evil as well for no good reason, particularly.
Well, that was actually my first film that I saw of yours. At least that I knew. When I saw that one, I was like, wow, this is just crazy. And I always remembered the sex scene. I'm like, wow, this is really, I was like, I don't know what to think about this.
Well, I'm glad you said that because with that film, when I was making it, like a lot of people were going, Jake, do you really want to do the scene like that? And it's like, it's a bit offensive. And it's kind of like my mantra for that film was I'm making this film as a present to my 16-year-old self.
Right.
So all of the things that I wanted to see as a teenager, I wanted to do when I made Evil Aliens. So that's why there was such thing as nothing could go too far, in my opinion, because it was a spastic film. There was no reason to take any of it seriously. It was designed to be fun.
Absolutely.
And it was like, I wanted to give people the kind of sense of fun that I had when I was watching like Evil Dead for the first time and Phantasm and all of those movies where I just watched them. Because with those movies, you just couldn't believe what was happening on screen and you couldn't really predict where it was going to go. And that's what I wanted to make a film like that. Whereas if you just stopped it like sort of 20 minutes in, you go, what the fuck is going to happen? And I don't believe that you could predict what's going to happen to them because you just, it was one of those things where I just wanted to go take left turns all the time.
I got to ask, because they were in a graveyard and they were having sex on a tombstone. Any Phantasm thing with that?
Well, I'm sure. I think that there's a lot of Phantasm references in that film.
Right.
So I think that one thing about Evil Aliens is what's really nice is that I've put so many little touches in, and if people know horror films, then that they can get a lot more out of it. But I don't want to spoil it by necessarily pointing to each one. Some are very obvious, and some are much more sort of coded, just little moments. But you might be right.
I'm going to say I am, because that's what I thought of as soon as I saw that scene. I was like, oh, yes. Yeah.
But the only difference is it's not a graveyard, it's a stone circle. That's the only difference.
Right. But it kind of reminded me of that.
But it's the same.
So, yeah.
It's exactly the same kind of vibe. Yeah, it's opening with a kind of sex scene which goes wrong. Very wrong.
What kind of budget did you have for that movie?
Okay, that movie was like a low budget, but it was a good low budget compared to the first film. So that was like about £287,000.
Oh wow, yeah.
And so that was a decent budget, and we had money to do all of the visual effects and all of the. It's a pretty crazy, it's a crazy film in a sense of when you broke that script down, and people were going, "How the fuck are you going to do this?" And it's kind of like, I'm not sure, but we kind of just the attitude was like, let's just fucking see what we can do. Like it was. Just try not to censor ourselves and just think that it might be possible. So there are a lot of things that we weren't sure how we were going to do them, like the combine harvester sequence, for instance.
Oh, I love that scene.
Yeah, and like a combine harvester is a deadly piece of machinery and it's a big fucking dangerous thing.
Right.
And there's not many people that would really allow you to use a combine harvester and put sort of shit gore through it. But a friend of mine, his parents, they owned a farm. And it's actually another filmmaker. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him or you know his work. A guy called Adam Mason.
No, I don't think so. What has he done? Just as reference?
Well, Adam Mason, he's done. His early films. He did his first film was a film called The 13th Sign, and then he did a film called Dust.
I've seen that. Yeah,
The Devil's Chair. He did that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he's done he did a found footage movie recently, but I can't remember the name of it. But Adam's done a lot of stuff. But me and Adam were friends at that point because we used to go to Fright Fest, the horror film festival, and we met there and we became friends. So when I was putting Evil Aliens together, I kind of just reached out to different people that I knew. I said, can anyone help us with this, with these sort of sequences? And he said, his parents owned this farm and it was a working farm. So we went and met up with his parents and said, would you let us shoot our crazy horror film here? Now, most farmers would have said no, but because their son was a horror filmmaker, they said yes. So
That's awesome.
And basically we kind of lucked out on that, because what that meant is we had access to a working farm. And that was basically our studio. And it's a fucking big place as well, man. So we had everything we needed there. So, we basically relocated everything to that farm. And the whole shoot, people were staying on site or just outside of it. And, it was an amazing, amazing place. And without that one element, I don't think we could have made it. Do you see what I mean? So
sure.
Lucky.
Well, I was curious about that scene when the combine harvester goes over one of the aliens and I see it shoot out the back.
Oh,
did that really run over it? Because it looks...
that's a visual effect.
Okay, it looks so good though. It was like...
I'm glad you like that, because we did put a lot of shit through the front of the combine harvester, but it didn't actually go through. We attached bits of gore to it.
Right.
But the bit when he runs over, I'm really pleased you did that, because that was a composite shot that I did, and it was myself and a mate who did all the visual effects in that film.
Right.
And we spent a year doing about 134 visual effects shots, and we had a little render farm of like 4 computers strapped together in my front room, and I lived in a basement flat in Camden at the time in London, and like the landlady came down one day, but she was a bit worried the electricity bill had gone up about 1,000%. She said, do you know anything why this is happening? She came down to my flat and I had all these computers strapped together, and we were rendering all of the visual effects, all of the CG stuff, because it took forever to do it at that quality back then.
Right.
And even though now it's very dated, and the CG that's moved on massively since then, but we did that all ourselves, and we this was in 2003 that we were doing this. We spent a year in that, so I had my own little visual effects facility to do that.
Oh man, I actually didn't mind the CGI at all. I thought it was really good, and
thanks, man.
The tone of the movie was actually it fit. Like, it didn't feel out of place. It just kind of fit. Like, to me, I got the tone of the film right off the bat. So
I'm glad you liked it. I mean, some people have a lot of problem with CGI stuff, and but look, most of the gore we did, we built everything as prosthetics.
Right.
All of the stuff when you're seeing people ripped up and gore, that's right. But we did enhance a couple of bits when we didn't always have enough blood, and people didn't like any of the splats we did, which are slightly CG. So I kind of regret doing that now. But we used so much blood on that show, man.
Yeah, there was quite a bit.
Yeah. So, but that was great. To me, that was great fun. That was like being a kid in a candy store doing all the things that you aren't supposed to do.
I gotta ask, this is one of the things that's been stuck in my head, because I rewatched the movie obviously recently here. The Wurzels song that they did. The Combine Harvester song. I cannot get that out of my head now.
Oh man, well that was a #1 hit in the UK. And that was a #1 hit, I think, in like the 70s when I was a really small kid. And it was a song which was it's such a ridiculous song. And I believe in the States you had a song by Melanie called I've Got a New Pair of Roller Skates.
That's what I was wondering, which came first.
I'm not sure. I think you have to look up the history, but I think maybe the roller skates but the Wurzels are this country band, so they changed it to Combine Harvester if it was second. And it's such a ridiculous song, but it was a #1 hit in the UK, so everyone knew that song. But because it was a #1 hit in the 70s and it was a comedy song, the biggest problem was getting the licensing for it. And it looked like at one point we wouldn't be able to afford to license it for the film.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I spent ages working on the investor, telling him that we had to have this song, because he was trying to say, why don't we get a sound alike? Why don't we get somebody else to do like a version of it? I said, no, you've got to have the actual song. So in the end, I managed to squeeze like an extra sort of batch of money just to get the song, and that's become one of a lot of people's favorite bit in the film. So I'm so pleased that we managed to get that.
Yeah, I think that was a good call. I definitely do. Yeah, because that's me and Pat in particular, who is also on the show here. He loves that part with me. So
yeah, great. Well, I was always in half a mind whether I was going to do like a sort of sing-along bit for that, where you had a little bouncing ball with the lyrics on screen, but I kind of felt better of it because some people might have found that,
a little too over the top.
But it's kind of like I reckon somebody on the internet should do that because it's a fun idea.
Yeah, there you go. We get the ball rolling, guys. If you're listening and you hear this,
like the kind of splatstick horror film sing along.
I think it would be okay. And for me, I think that would be fun. I'd be perfectly okay with that.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just one of the ideas I had, but I didn't do. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. And like I say, a lot of people they always go away from that thinking of that. So it's one of those things which really worked. And the idea came about, Alex, is when I was writing that film, like literally the way that I was working through is that I wanted to go, right, what if I was on a farm? What weapons would I have available to me? Yeah. So I made this great list of weapons, and the very top of that list was a combine harvester. I mean, what could be a better weapon than a combine harvester?
I don't think anybody else has ever used that I can think of any other horror movies.
Yeah, I think that there's one other film, and I can't remember the name of it, where they had a combine harvester. This is the film made afterwards.
Was it the Scarecrow one?
Yeah, I can't remember what is the film, but there is one where they did a combine harvester. But I'm pretty sure Evil Aliens was the first film to really use the combine harvester in a meaningful splatter manner.
Right.
So I'll take that as being the guy that started that particular sort of harvesting machinery ball roll.
You're the pioneer of it. Definitely in my book.
Thank you, man. We got that cold bloody.
Well, sometime a little bit later, you probably, as you call it, Doghouse is you consider to be your debut film. Excuse me.
Do I? Oh, how do I?
I've heard you say that in an interview where you said that you feel like that's your debut film, or that's your first real feature film.
Well, what I meant by that is because it's the first real film where I had a proper budget,
right.
and I was working with established actors.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
So it's the first kind of film which would be considered like a, like in someone's career they work with like a professional, like a real movie in the sense of it being with. Yeah, when we had a proper theatrical release, it was Sony that picked it up in the UK, and so for me that was like so. But I'm not belittling my work before.
Okay.
It. Yeah,
I was going to say because Evil Aliens is great. I was like, I love that movie. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I do as well. So for me, my debut film is basically is Razorblade Smile, but
right.
in the sense of when people say, so I'm not negating that. It was more the fact that I felt that that's the first film where I really had done something with the kind of cast that you getting to work with someone like Stephen Graham. Like we got him on the film. He had just done Public Enemies with Michael Mann, and then he was going on. He did Doghouse, and then after that he went straight to New York to do Boardwalk Empire, being directed by Martin Scorsese. So I got him between Scorsese and Mann,
which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So for me, it was just a chance to work at what was a bigger level,
Really, and you had a really great cast. All those actors did really well, and they're all doing like big work now. So
yeah. So I mean, for me, it was just great because on that movie we had like about 1.6 million. So that's a substantial difference. Do you know what I mean? In terms of the way that you could, like, we spent 12 weeks building the town, for instance, on that. Because that town didn't exist. We built it at a hospital complex, like a disused hospital out in Midhurst in Sussex, which is just outside of London. And we built that entire all the rows of houses and all the shops. That was all built.
Right. Yeah. No. How long did that take to put together?
Well, to build the town, we had 12 weeks of construction work.
Wow.
Which was fantastic. So and then all the different zombies, they were all individually designed. I worked with a great comic book artist and a guy called James Ryman, and he does a lot of fantasy art as well. If you look up James Ryman's work, look at his stuff on the internet, he's a brilliant artist, and we designed each individual character to have their own physical traits, and then we work with a makeup designer and we sculpted all those characters, and they all had their own Bibles, and we had a team of makeup artists, one for each character. Basically, it was a brilliant.
Yeah, I think they were really great zombie characters. Like they were just so unique to each and their own abilities and what they did. And like one had scissors, one had the cleaver, there was the cook, the surgeon, like all those different ones. I thought that was really great.
Exactly. So for me, it was the first time, perhaps as a director, where I felt that I really had the time and to get the kind of detail into the vision that I wanted to have. Because when you're doing lower budget films, there's always a lot of compromises. Like you can't get necessarily the things that you want to do, so you have to figure ways around of doing it. And often, sometimes restrictions are the mother of invention, but sometimes having enough money to do it how you want. So it was, for me, it was just it was the difference between, welcome to this world and from having come from the very low budget world before that. So not that, once again, that's the path where you go. I mean, I guess filmmakers in the States, I've met a lot of filmmakers on the festival circuit over the years who, have worked in America, and, those guys go from their really low budget films to doing big studio pictures, and, from doing something for a few $100,000, then they're doing stuff for like 10, 20 million.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean? But in the UK, you just can't get those kind of budgets. So getting a budget over $1 million in the UK is a pretty decent budget.
Right. Yeah. Well, I actually, with the zombies, what you call zombirds.
Yeah, the zombirds, because I don't know if you know the term, like you call
birds.
Like a girl a bird. Yeah, she's
Yes.
a bird. So they're zombirds because they're all, because the virus only affects the females. So,
I think I figured that out when I watched Guest House Paradiso.
Ah, cool, excellent.
So he was like, "Oh, bird, and other bird, and little bird," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's what that means." So,
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, that's why they're the zombirds. That's right.
Yeah, they were really great zombies for that. I know that with the cast, I mean, it seemed like they all really kind of worked really well together. Was there really good camaraderie on the set?
Yeah. Well, the thing with a film like that, because it was about this bunch of guys who are going away to try and cheer up their mate because he's depressed because he's getting divorced. And ironically, they're trying to prove to him that not all women are out to get him. And in fact, they are. And they're out to get them. And they can't handle their own relationships with women anyway. So that's the whole kind of setup for us to laugh at these guys. Because, Mel, when you put a bunch of guys together, they act very differently to how they do around their partners. So we just love that whole kind of setup. And to get the cast right, it was trying to get a bunch of guys that you genuinely believe were friends, that were mates. So for us, it was, for me, I was delighted. But when these guys got together, they really bonded with each other. Because for me as a director, the biggest nightmare is if they didn't get on and you had to pretend.
Right.
That was really difficult. But because they got on in real life, they had that on screen. And that's the one thing you can never predict if that's going to happen. So I was so delighted that did happen with those guys.
Yeah, it seemed they worked really well together, like all of them.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. We really did.
Well, there was a lot of stunts in the movie too, I noticed. Did anybody get hurt? Because it seemed like...
No. I mean, I was very lucky to work with. I've become friends with one of the stunt guys on it, a guy called Peter Padero, and he specialises in firework. He's the guy that gets setting fire on it, and he's become a really close friend, and we work together a lot now. And he's just a terrific guy. So we had Rocky Taylor was the stunt coordinator on that though, and he had done a lot of Bond films and stuff like that. So we had a really great stunt crew, and it was great fun because once again, it's the first time I had enough money to do proper stunts. And all of that stuff was very well planned. We had rigs, we had a lot of safety. So once again, like as a filmmaker, you always want to set things on fire and blow stuff up. And when you're on lower budgets, it's quite hard to do that. But when you've got enough money, all of a sudden you can start throwing people through windows, off ladders, crash cars, all that kind of stuff that you want to do. Yeah,
I was pretty impressed. I was like, wow, this is like way more active than any of the other movies.
Yeah, well, that's just like, once again, like I say, having a bit of money just allows you to realize those things that are in the script and get them on screen. So that's it's just great fun doing that kind of stuff, man. I love doing stunts, and stunt guys, they're such nice guys as well, and they're really into what they're doing.
I can imagine. Yeah, they have to be, really.
And they've got crazy stories. Like when you're friends with a guy who sets himself on fire for a living and throws himself off buildings, he's got some fun stories.
Yeah, he's definitely lived a life that I have not.
Yeah, last time we went to one of his parties, he was setting our friends on fire just to show you he can set you on fire if you like.
It's just like having a drink, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. And he was in my ABCs with Death segment, in fact. Which I
oh,
don't,
that's right. Yeah, I watched that. The
yeah,
Speed.
yeah, it's for speed. But the demon guy that gets on fire, that's my stunt guy friend Pete,
Ah,
and he flew all the way over to the Nevada desert to come and get set on fire for me.
that's yeah. Where did you shoot that at?
Yeah, we shot that, and we shot that in the kind of the I think it's the Nevada desert where is it? It meets the other desert, the Navajo. I think it's like on the border.
Gosh, I know what Mojave.
It's Mojave. Yeah, it's
Yes.
a couple of hours drive, well, a few hours drive outside of LA, going north. And if you look on the map, there's a place called Kramer Junction where we were staying, where we shot that.
Okay.
And, Kramer Junction is like a sort of one diner town with a truck stop and the railroad road going past it. And we stayed in a place called the Relax Inn, and it's actually the least relaxing place in the world, because every minute you've got trucks coming in blowing their horns, you've got them changing their tires, and this is all outside the little motel thing. And then you've got trains going past every hour, all night, probably every 10 minutes. And as they go by, they let off their horns. It's such a fucking noisy place, man. And we were there for a few days. We did not get much sleep, I can tell you.
So you actually, I mean, I was wondering, because I was like, he has to be in Nevada or something.
Yeah.
Because when I watched it, I was like, there's nothing out there like that unless he went to like Africa. I don't even know.
Yeah, well, because when I got asked to do one of the ABC's Death, because it was I got to show my film. Doghouse was picked for the Fantastic Fest, which amazing festival down in Texas, in Austin. And the guy Tim Lee, one of the producers on ABC's, he was asking a lot of the alumni of Fantastic Fest if they'd be up for doing a segment on the first ABC's, and obviously I was honoured to be asked. But because we were kind of given carte blanche of what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a film that wouldn't necessarily look like it was made by an English director. I wanted to make it so when you saw it, you'd think, well, that's an American movie. Plus, also, there's another little Phantasm kind of like a nod in there with the muscle car.
The car, yes, I knew it.
Which is that's a 1967 Mustang Cougar, not quite the Hemi Cougar, but close.
Very close. Yeah, no, I picked that up
to sort of play with a Phantasm-esque image of this brilliant muscle car.
Yeah, no, you really are a big Phantasm fan. That's awesome, though.
I tell you what, man, that car is insane as well. It'd be like 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. It was just like a monster,
Wow. Yeah, it did look really fast when you were doing the hood shots. I was like, wow.
Yeah, man. That was, once again, that was loads of fun. Just, shooting out in the desert with like a muscle car and just craziness. So, that was just something that really enjoyed doing. And setting my man on fire.
Yeah, so you said that the stunt guy that was in that, he was the guy that got set on fire. The girl with the sword.
Yeah, the witch, the burning witch.
That's the one.
Yeah,
yes.
Except he doubles for a woman who's quite a bit different to him physically, but she's got that big cloak that gets thrown over her face. That then cuts, and it doubles for it cuts for him, and he's a fire specialist. So basically, that's like I say, he's used to being set on fire safely.
Well, I wanted to ask you. I know Dan Schaffer. I believe I'm saying his name.
I think it's Dan Schaefer.
You might be right. Yeah, I wasn't.
But
sure.
I think some people say Schaffer, but I think we call him Dan Schaefer.
Dan Schaefer. Okay, well,
he's a brilliant he's a brilliant comic book creator.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Did he come up with the entire concept, or did you guys work together on that?
Well, basically, he was a fan of my early films. He was a fan of both Razor-Based Smile and Evil Aliens. And
okay,
I was actually doing an interview about Evil Aliens for a Camden magazine called The Lock magazine, London magazine, and it was a kind of, the journalist was like a goth girl. It was really cool, and she was good friends with Dan Schaefer, and she said to me, oh, my mate Dan likes your movies, and he's this great comic book creator. Do you know his comics? And I said, at that point I hadn't heard of Dog Witch, and she said, I think you'd love his comics. And she said, I'll tell you what, I'll bring some copies of this for you. And normally when a journalist says that, you think, I'll never hear from them again. But she came back, true to her word, about a week later, she came round up to Camden and dropped these comics off for me, and I was just blown away by them, and I loved his work. And because she was friends with him, we then got to meet and we became friends. And for a couple of years, we were just talking about, wouldn't it be great to do a film? Because he had, he had actually written a screenplay for Dogwitch, but that would need it would need a lot of money. You'd need to do that in a kind of Tim Burton-esque manner to really do it. So, so you'd need like studio money to really get that film to the level it would need to be. But we were looking to do something that we thought we could do on a lower budget, and the zombie thing, was happening, and we thought it was a bit tapped out even at that point, because unlike when I had done Dead and the Damned many years before, which didn't get made, by the point we were in like 2007 at this point, and it's like zombies were big news, and we were thinking, well, maybe it's getting a bit tired. But one day, his girlfriend, she had like the flu and she was ill, and when he got home one day, he saw his girlfriend coming towards him with quite a snot coming down her nose and like kind of groaning, and he just thought, humorously, he thought she reminded him of a zombie. And that triggered the idea in Dan. It's like, well, what if you had a virus which only affected one gender? And because Dan's a feminist, and he's like really into that, like like playing around with the sort of the battle of the sexes thing. Right. And then that really sparked that off, and we just like riffed on that. But Dan went away and wrote the script. I mean, it's his work as a writer, but I kind of encouraged him in terms of structure and how to get this working as a film. So I was lucky that he's a great writer, and we had this great script, which I then showed to a producer, and immediately they loved it, and then that's how that went into production. So we got lucky with that the first time out.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the tropes in there, like but about the gender politics of it, I guess. I've noticed that there's like little subtle things in there. And was each zombie in particular about that? Like, was there each one of them?
Yeah, each zombie was like a metaphor for like a different male anxiety. So basically, the bride, she represents the fear of marriage. The snipper represents castration anxiety.
Yeah.
The fat bird represents, like the fear of your partner becoming old and fat. The surgeon, like the dentist, represents fear, like just fear of being invaded in some way medically. So we just wanted to do all of the things that men have some kind of anxiety about women, in a sense.
Right.
But in a really fun way, because it's still a fun zombie romp. So we were trying to do it. So we were just trying to use all of those little aspects of things to give it a bit more of a subtext. So it went over some people's heads, and there were some bits which we really liked, which were cut from the film. Like the film actually originally started off with a prologue sequence set in the town the night before the guys go there, where you see the soldiers there trying to clear up the town, but they can't handle it, and there's a castration scene which got cut out.
Is that where the penis is in the window?
Well, no, that's just a joke. That's just one of those new age shops. Look at that; it's a knob in a box.
Yes.
But we had like a scene where a soldier he got the snip by the snipper. So, but that scene got cut out actually. So not a soldier; it was a guy. There's a guy who was hiding literally in a doghouse in someone's garden.
Okay. I watched a lot of the bonus features, but I don't think that one was in there. Yeah,
well, I don't know. Has it been exercised again?
No, I may have missed that one somehow.
Yeah, but so it started off with this sequence, but that never made it to the final version. Like I say, a lot of people haven't seen that stuff still. But I think in the States it was put on as extra features. I'm not sure if it is in other territories though.
I picked up no region. Well, it was all region copy. I believe it was from the UK actually.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. It depends on the version you've got, but check out the extras and see if it's on there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check again for sure.
But so it's interesting. But obviously, the things get deleted and stuff gets changed a bit. But
right.
there was a version of the film that we liked a bit more, which was had a bit more of that stuff in it. But I think that some of the producers were a bit squeamish, so it got watered down just a touch. But I'm still very proud of the film. No.
Definitely think that was a great film. I like all of them, and it seems like it just gets progressively better, which begs the question: is there going to be another film, another feature?
Well, I've been working on a number of things. It's actually myself and Dan Schaefer who wrote that film. He wrote me another film, which for the last nearly 4 years we were trying to get off the ground, which was a bit different. It was a bit more kind of like it's very graphic novel based, but it was about a hitman who had to fake his own hits, and with like a crime lord drug boss coming over from the States trying to take over the London drug scene. And it was kind of like a graphic novel-y version, like somewhere between say Snatch and Ocean's 11 or something.
Okay.
But we tried to get that film off the ground, and we were very close to getting it financed. But once again, it was a film that needed more money. And because of that, we needed to get quite a big cast together for it. And we almost had that together, but after 4 years, it collapsed. We were like a couple of weeks away from starting it, but then the finance didn't come together. So I'm kind of gutted by that. So I spent a long time trying to get that film made, and then off the back of it, I have to earn some money as well. So I had to, do other work and bits and bobs. So, and then I didn't have any other scripts which were ready to go when eventually we just couldn't get that over the line. So over the last couple of years, I've been working on some other films. I've got a werewolf film called Feral, which has a high concept, which I won't go into though. But I've got a couple of producers attached to that, and we are very keen on getting that one made, which is looking like that could happen next year. I'm attached to an underwater horror thriller film called Relics. Yeah, which we shot a proof of concept for, but I can't show it to anyone because it's for like financiers and the powers that be. But the producers with that are the American film market at the moment. So if that gains some traction because people like the proof of concept we shot for that, that's like this great underwater horror thing. So there's a couple of things which are bubbling, but until you've got the money, Alex, you're not making a film. And because I've been trying to progressively try and get more money for each film I've done, I've kind of resisted the temptation to go back and do something on a lower budget. Right. Not that I wouldn't do it, but you just have to get yourself into a different mindset if these bigger films don't happen, then I will go back and do something on a lower budget, basically.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's like when you're moving and you're going uphill, you want to keep on that momentum.
Exactly, but because the way that the film industry has changed over the last few years, and I'm sure you're pretty aware of this.
Sure.
But basically, the DVD, because of DVD, Blu-ray the internet has really affected the independent financing model.
Absolutely.
And because of people, like piracy and streaming and all these things, it now makes it very difficult for independents to get budgets together for films, to get the money. Like, so making a film, in that over £1 million, like £1 to £3 million bracket, it's hard to get your money back unless you get a very good release.
Right.
Because once a film gets pirated in one territory, then, it gets pirated all over the world, and, you lose a lot of income. And it's still very hard to make money back on the VOD streams and stuff as an independent producer. I'm sure people like Netflix do well, but a lot of money doesn't end up going back to the producers a lot of the time. So
I'm sure it's nothing, pennies.
Yeah. So what's happened is that's kind of squeezed that low budget end, and it's changed the market. So, I guess you speak to filmmakers quite a lot. Maybe they've talked about this. It's just got harder to make films on a decent budget, particularly in the UK, where people don't want to spend the money a lot of the time unless you have a big cast attached.
Right. Yeah. And, being an artist, as I am, I typically try to buy everything physical.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, and you're a fan as well. And, there are a lot of people that do that. But I think that there's people who grew up with the internet, though, who are a certain age, they're just not used to buying physical product, and they don't.
Right.
They kind of don't value it in the same way that we do.
It's too easy.
Yeah, and the thing is that the problem is that you can go online now and download anything. It's like literally within seconds or stream it.
Right.
And for a lot of people, I think the temptation is too much for them to want to buy stuff. I mean, like I say, we come from a collector's generation, so we like collecting stuff physical. I'm sitting here in my room and I've got thousands of DVDs and Blu-rays around me.
Right.
But I'm obsessed, but I'm sure, there's a lot of people I know who are the same as me, but there's also a lot, like a newer generation who I don't think they're into physical product, and physical product is dying a bit as well, apart from, it's becoming more of a collector's thing now.
Right. Hopefully it will not go the way of the dodo and perhaps stay like vinyl in some degree, I hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you know as well that I run Nucleus Films and we run a cult DVD label.
Absolutely.
Yeah, So because we're very much involved in that kind of scene, because not only am I a filmmaker, but I love releasing, like getting these cool cult movies released for an audience, and we try and do great collector's editions and packages of films that we love, and we've released some really great movies like Craze and Death Ship, Block for the House of Death, and all sorts of great crazy movies.
Was it the House of Cards? What is that? A documentary? That's a documentary.
House of Cards was a documentary because we make a lot of extra features for other people's releases. We do a lot of work for Arrow Films and Screenbound and Anchor Bay, and House of Cards was a feature that we made for the Amicus film Dr. Terror's House of Horrors.
Okay.
The Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee one, the anthology film, and it's called House of Cards because he calls it his house. The House of Horrors is the tarot pack. Peter Cushing says,
Nice.
there is no house in there, so that's why we called that feature that. And we got to interview. I don't know if you guys know the League of Gentlemen in the States, the British sort of weird TV guys. But
yeah. I know exactly who they are.
So Rhys Shearsmith is one of those guys, and we interviewed him for that, and some Jonathan Rigby who wrote English Gothic, and
nice.
we had some really great people in that documentary. So it's just a fun thing.
Well, I mean, and I was going to ask you about Nucleus Films. Your work with Mark Morris.
Yeah, Mark Morris, who is considered one of the big all-time aficionados of all cult movies. I mean,
right.
You could do a podcast with him if you want to.
Yeah, I thought about that. I was like, man, we should probably have him on too. But I was just.
But if you want to know anything about like cult movies from like the sort of 60s through to the 80s, he knows everything.
Yeah. So it's a really good partnership with you guys there.
Yeah, well at the moment, I mean, I don't know, you may have seen it on Facebook, but we are doing a Eurocult restoration project. It's called the Nucleus Films Eurocult Restoration, and we are trying to. We've got an IndieGoGo campaign to raise money to restore Lady Frankenstein and Death Laid an Egg, both Italian cult classics, and they're great movies. So if you go into IndieGoGo or my Facebook, you'll see the links for that. So.
I'm going to post that in the information below for you, so for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be terrific. But obviously, if you want to pledge, though, you've got to make sure in the States that you've got you can play multi-region. Do you have a multi-region player?
Right, gotcha.
Because the Blu-ray will be Region B of the UK because we've got to license it from the Italians for Region B. But there are a lot of people who have multi-region players who can play stuff. So if you're a collector with a multi-region player, then you can order it because we have had a lot of orders from the States for it.
Well, yeah, and definitely because you know how crazy horror fans are. If they can get it anywhere, they'll buy a player for it, and they're not too bad these days.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, multi-region's the way to go if you want to get some of these great things. But check out the campaign, and if you can tell your podcast audience, or we can, if they're interested in seeing like Death Laid an Egg and Lady Frankenstein restored 2K quality for proper Blu-ray release. And we may have some quite exciting news on that if you follow the campaign. So
absolutely,
it's going very well as well at the moment. We're
that's good to hear.
We're coming to the halfway point, and we've raised over 17,500 at the moment. So we're doing good.
Well, I hope that gets off the ground. And if you guys are listening and you do, even if you just want to support, I mean, you don't necessarily always have to get something, but you can always get it and then buy a multi-region DVD player or Blu-ray player and play it anyway. So
exactly,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you like Eurocult movies, you'll like these.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I really greatly appreciate you coming on here. And I guess I just want to ask one last question with you. Do you have any dream projects that you would love to work on if you had an unlimited budget?
Oh, gosh. It's really weird because I guess it's hard to think in that way because there always is a limited budget. But
yeah,
I mean, I think that there's films I would like, scripts of mine that I would like to dust off and get made if I had an unlimited budget. But that to me, an unlimited budget would just be a few million.
Right.
So but I don't in a world where there's so many things, so much stuff now is adaptations of comic books and things like that. I'm looking forward to return of filmmakers returning to like original films.
Right.
We went and we were lucky enough to see John Carpenter play live
Yes.
his music in London on Halloween this year. He played in London. And,
man.
I grew up with a lot of John Carpenter films. And, when you look back at films like, Escape from New York and The Fog and those kind of movies, the fact that they weren't based on comic books and stuff is what made them really stand out. And I'm kind of looking forward to a return to original work from filmmakers rather than just adaptations,
Right.
So, and I'm also, we don't need to keep on remaking these films.
Right.
We need to come up with new ideas.
Yeah, like they're remaking Suspiria.
Yeah, which to me sounds like a bad idea because Suspiria is its own thing, and I don't think that you need to touch that. It's foolish, but I think it's going to end in tears. But at the end of the day, I'm more excited by original work, stuff which isn't predictable, stuff where you don't know where it's going. And I think that what excites me about filmmaking in the future is doing stuff which people is going to take them by surprise rather than something that they think that they know already. Right. So, I would looking forward to all of the new original stuff that people are going to be talking about in the next 10 years. Let them remake that stuff in 20 years time, but let's start making original stuff again.
Well, I agree with you 100% on that. And I think independent film is pretty much helping push that a little bit. And I think it's starting to show a little bit to the mainstream, to the top producers, the top execs out there, that they're starting to see that they can sort of make money with a good idea, even if it is a risk.
Exactly. Well, every film's a risk, but
right.
we understand that. But I think that's where as a filmmaker you need to show a bit of form before they trust you. But I think it's the original work which I think is really exciting, though. And just going back and remaking stuff all the time to me just feels a bit stale. And we don't need that. We need to move on. The world is moving on, technology is moving on. Let's tell new stories for a generation that are going to appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's why I love the 80s so much, because they just had so many original ideas.
Yeah, but I think it's back then people weren't afraid to be so crazy. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like they weren't so bothered about whether, if you look at a lot of movies that were made then, they're kind of off the hook because it's almost like people weren't frightened about making stuff which was odd. Whereas these days, everything feels like it has to be marketed. Right. And maybe that's, we're in a much more kind of like sort of industry which feels it has to be a commodity. It has to have a sort of set of action figures, or it has to have a computer game attached to it. They don't like things which might stand on their own. And sometimes the more interesting things are things which stand on their own, and you don't want action figures of.
Well, and then sometimes movies that do have all the things that we're talking about, they become cult films later. It's like they're not popular in the beginning, but
exactly, and sometimes that's the most interesting thing, isn't it? To find out what's going to be that next thing, and that's what's exciting. So let's see how it goes, man, and let's see what's coming down the pipe for us all. Well, especially now you've got the Donald. We're all the world is facing a new horror.
Yeah, it's a new horror movie called America coming out this January.
Yeah. Well, like I say, we spoke about this before we started, but we've got Brexit in the UK. You've got the Donald. I mean, I think that's a lot of material for horror filmmakers to get their heads around,
and comedians.
But comedians are kind of almost like they've almost been making a joke of Donald for such a long time now, but then he became president. It's almost like the egg is on their face now. But instead of laughing at him, we've got to exploit the horror aspects of this.
There you go. There's going to be a lot of political horror coming out soon. I'm calling it.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we're going to see a more politicized horror thing, which could be quite interesting, because I think because there's a lot of people are really scared about the way the world is going now, and that lends itself to maybe some really disturbing horror movies.
I agree 100%. Yeah, no.
Or a lot of great comedy ones.
Yeah, I think there'll be a mix of the two as well.
Yeah, so, I'm interested in seeing that. I don't know if you guys have, in the States, have you seen Black Mirror at all?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, because Black Mirror does. I mean, the one where the Prime Minister has to fuck a pig. I mean, that's pretty far out.
The very first episode. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering, maybe in America it's time for something like that with the Donald. So
yeah, I don't doubt that it will happen. Something is going to come out. Somebody's going to get mad, and then it's just going to come out, I think.
Exactly. So we could be in some terrible times in many ways, but interesting times from a horror filmmaking perspective. So who knows what's going to happen?
That's an excellent point. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you so much for coming on, Jake. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we really do look forward to what you got coming up. So, thank you again, man.
Well, cheers, Alex. I really appreciate it, and and I hope all the Beyond the Veil podcast listeners enjoy it. So, thanks for talking to me.